The United States has once again violated its obligation by launching and continuing large-scale military attacks against Iran's sovereignty and territorial integrity, including attacks on installations in the southern cities of Iran and several Iranian islands in the Persian Gulf on 7th and 8th of July. These renewed attacks constitute another flagrant violation of Article 2 of the Charter and material breach of the Paragraph 1 of the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding, under which the United States expressly committed to cease all military actions against Iran and to refrain from the threat or use of force. Iran remained committed to the faithful implementation of Memorandum of Understanding, provided that the United States fully and faithfully complies with its own obligation. However, should the United States continue to violate its obligation under the MoU, Iran will no longer be bound to fulfill its obligation under the MoU. I thank you. Iran categorically rejects the politically motivated allegation made today by France, UK and US regarding its peaceful nuclear program. Their claims are a deliberate attempt to distort Resolution 2231, misrepresent the facts, and misuse the Security Council for narrow political purposes. The root cause of the current situation is well known. It lies in the United States' unlawful withdrawal from the JCPOA on 2018, the continued failure of the E3 to fulfill their commitment, and the unlawful military attacks carried out by the United States and Israeli regime against Iran, including attacks on IAEA safeguard nuclear facilities in June 2025 and again on 28 February 2026. Iran has consistently rejected weapons of mass destruction. Its nuclear program has never been diverted to military purposes and has remained exclusively peaceful under the most extensive IAEA verification regime. Yet, instead of condemning and holding accountability the United States and the Israeli regime for their unlawful attacks on Iran IAEA safeguard nuclear facilities, some Council members, particularly France, have sought to shift responsibility onto the victim. The United States and the Israeli regime bear full responsibility for the consequences of this unlawful act and must be held fully accountable. The United States has once again violated its obligation by launching and continuing large-scale military attacks against Iran's sovereignty and territorial integrity, including attacks on installations in the southern cities of Iran and several Iranian islands in the Persian Gulf on 7th and 8th of July. These renewed attacks constitute another flagrant violation of Article 2 of the Charter and material breach of the Paragraph 1 of the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding, under which the United States expressly committed to cease all military actions against Iran and to refrain from the threat or use of force. The United States bears full international responsibility for all legal and political consequences arising from its unlawful action. Under the Islamabad MoU, responsibility for maritime navigation through the Strait of Hormuz, including its reopening and all necessary demining operations, rests exclusively with Iran. Any attempt by external actors to interfere with or establish parallel arrangement would violate the MoU, undermine its implementation, delay the restoration of normal commercial navigation, jeopardize maritime safety, and increase regional tensions. In light of the United States' persistent and ongoing violations of the international obligation, Iran recalls the responsibility of the Secretary General and Security Council under the UN Charter to maintain international peace and security. These responsibilities are especially important in cases of aggression, breach of the peace, and threat of international peace and security. They must take effective and decisive measures to stop the United States' unlawful act of aggression. They must prevent any further escalation. They must also ensure that the United States fully honors its obligation and is held accountable for its aggression, its serious violation of international law, and the crimes resulting from those acts. Iran remained committed to the faithful implementation of Memorandum of Understanding, provided that the United States fully and faithfully complies with its own obligation. However, should the United States continue to violate its obligation under the MoU, Iran will no longer be bound to fulfill its obligation under the MoU. I thank you.
Amid escalating Middle East tensions, the White House has said it still remains committed to the U.S Iran Memorandum of Understanding, insisting the framework is not dead from Washington's perspective. This comes even though President Trump declared earlier this week that the deal to end the war was over, raising doubts about whether the ceasefire arrangement had any future. Trump's remarks followed Iranian strikes on shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, which he framed as a breach of good faith and a reason to walk away from the understanding. Now, however, Washington is saying it will honor the agreement if Iran also complies with its terms, signaling that U.S. adherence is conditional but still possible. A senior American official said, quote, "The United States is still committed to finding a resolution, and technical talks continue." President Trump made his feelings very clear yesterday in no uncertain terms. Iran's attacks on these innocent vessels are acts of terrorism. The Memorandum of Understanding is performance-based, and Iran's actions constitute failed performance at an unacceptable level. Unquote. The Memorandum of Understanding had called for the Strait of Hormuz to remain open and toll-free for 60 days, aiming to protect global energy flows while talks unfolded. Iran, however, maintains that the agreement allows it to regulate shipping through the waterway, arguing that it retains the right to enforce certain controls. The White House is signaling that diplomacy remains on the table despite rising tensions, trying to show that missiles and negotiations are running in parallel. Meanwhile, U.S. ally Qatar has also called for full implementation of the U.S Iran Memorandum of Understanding, backing the framework as the best current tool to prevent wider escalation. Doha has urged firm guarantees for free navigation through the Strait of Hormuz, stressing that shipping security is vital for regional and global economic stability. Qatar's prime minister has discussed regional de-escalation with Egypt's foreign minister, seeking broader Arab buy-in for lowering the temperature in the Gulf. Qatari negotiators are holding talks with Iranian officials to ease tensions, according to reports, positioning Doha as a key mediator between Tehran and Washington. Those talks are said to be coordinated with the United States, with a source indicating that Washington is closely involved in shaping and supporting Qatar's outreach. At the same time, Tehran has struck a defiant tone, issuing a fresh warning against Israel on July 10, even as it engages in back-channel diplomacy. Iran warned that any attack on its infrastructure would trigger direct retaliation and that Israel would not be spared, underlining that its deterrent posture remains uncompromising.